Let's talk about Jody Ledkin. Jody Ledkin was born on September 20th, 1970. Details about her early childhood remain limited, but available reports describe an upbringing marked by instability. Before she reached her 14th birthday, Jody and her family relocated 4 separate times, moving from place to place before eventually settling on North Prospect Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. The frequent transitions shaped much of her early environment and contributed to a home life that was often described as unsettled. By 1981, Jody's parents, Karen Stratton and Melvin Ledkins, had divorced. Not long afterward, Karen remarried, but that marriage also ended in divorce. Despite these changes, Jody maintained relationships with both of her parents. Her father later described her as pretty much a good little girl, reflecting his belief in her fundamental character. Her mother described her as deeply trusting and someone other people often leaned on for support. As she entered her early teenage years, Jody began struggling with truancy. She skipped school frequently and had faced disciplinary consequences. In 1984, she pushed a security guard during an incident that resulted in her being assigned a juvenile probation officer. Her repeated absences from school and prior attempts to run away from home led to her placement in a juvenile probation program. By 1985, however, Jody and her mother appeared to be reaching a more stable period. Their relationship was reportedly improving after years of tension and instability. Outside of her challenges, Jody had clear interests and aspirations. She was fascinated by outer space and dreamed of one day becoming an astronaut, imagining a future far beyond the circumstances of her early life. On May 23, 1985, 14-year-old Jody Ledkin skipped school, something she had done before and had previously faced consequences for. Rather than attending classes, she chose to spend the day and evening with her friend, Melissa Folescroft. Jody remained at Melissa's home, located near East 14th Street and Winchester Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. The day passed without any documented incidents, and there was no indication that it would unfold differently from other times she had skipped school. Later that evening, Jody and Melissa left the house on foot and walked approximately 14 minutes to the home of Jody's boyfriend near the 700 block of Cambridge Street. At some point during the visit, Jody became involved in an argument with her boyfriend and friends. She wanted to go to an unspecified location, but the others did not want to accompany her. The disagreement did not escalate beyond that, and eventually, Jody and Melissa left the boyfriend's home together, walking back to Melissa's residence. At approximately 10 p.m., Jody used the phone at Melissa's house to call her mother, Karen Stratton. She asked for a ride home to their residence in the East Bottoms area. Karen did not have access to her car that evening and told Jody she could not pick her up. Jody responded that she would find a ride home with a friend. Shortly after ending the call, Jody left Melissa's home on foot. Melissa later told investigators she believed Jody was heading back toward her boyfriend's house. Jody was last seen walking northbound on Winchester Avenue from 14th Street. She carried no extra clothing and had no money with her. There is no confirmed information regarding what she was wearing at the time. After that night, she was never seen or heard from again. On May 24, 1985, Karen Stratton realized that her 14-year-old daughter had not returned home. Jody had said she would find a ride, but as the morning hours passed, it became clear she had not made it back to their East Bottoms residence. Concerned, Karen contacted Jody's deputy juvenile officer to report her missing. The juvenile officer responded by suggesting that Jody may have been upset about something and advised Karen to give her the weekend to cool off. Given Jody's history of running away and prior disciplinary issues, the situation was approached as a possible temporary absence rather than an emergency. 2 warrants were prepared, identifying Jody as an endangered juvenile who should be taken into police custody if found. However, despite these warrants, a formal missing person report was not filed with law enforcement at that time. The absence of an official report would not come to light immediately. It was not until 1987, 2 years later, during a conversation between Karen and Jody's caseworker, that it was discovered Jody had never been formally reported missing to police. By then, the first warrant had already been canceled by the courts in July 1986. The delay meant that critical early investigative opportunities, particularly within the first 48 hours, had passed without coordinated law enforcement involvement. During those initial years, Karen conducted her own search efforts. She hung flyers throughout Kansas City and spoke directly with Jody's friends and acquaintances, hoping someone might provide information. Police eventually interviewed individuals who had seen Jody on the night she disappeared, but no significant leads emerged. Although foul play was suspected, there was little tangible evidence to move the investigation forward. In 1989, 3 years after Jody Ledkin's disappeared, her juvenile officer received a letter from an individual claiming to be Jody. The message stated that she was safe. It offered reassurance, but provided no explanation for her absence, no details about her location, and no account of why she had left home in 1985. The letter's contents were brief and did not clarify the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. The handwriting in the letter was compared to a previous sample written by Jody. When her mother, Karen Stratton, reviewed the comparison, she expressed uncertainty. She could not confidently say whether the handwriting truly matched her daughter's. The ambiguity surrounding the writing prevented investigators and family members from confirming its authenticity. Despite the potential significance of the letter, it did not produce any confirmed sightings or investigative breakthroughs. No physical evidence accompanied it, and no additional correspondence followed that could verify its origin. The letter did not establish whether Jody had chosen to leave voluntarily or whether someone else had written it in her name. Investigators considered the possibility that Jody may have left intentionally, particularly given her past behavior. At the same time, they maintained that regardless of her initial decision, there was likely an incident that placed her safety at risk. The letter ultimately deepened the uncertainty rather than resolving it, adding another unresolved element to a case already marked by unanswered questions and limited evidence. In 1993, Karen Stratton began receiving a series of threatening phone calls concerning her missing daughter. The caller demanded money in exchange for Jody's return. During one of the calls, the individual made a direct threat, stating, "If we don't get the money, your daughter will be sent to you in pieces." The calls were not isolated incidents. They continued over a period of approximately 2 years, creating a sustained pattern of intimidation. Rather than responding to the demands, Karen began recording the conversations. She preserved the calls and turned the recordings over to law enforcement. Investigators created written transcripts of each conversation, documenting the language used and the specific threats made. Authorities worked to trace the origin of the calls and were able to triangulate them to a payphone located in Kansas City. Despite narrowing down the source to that location, they were unable to identify the individual responsible. The existence of the recordings provided evidence that someone was deliberately targeting Jody's mother. However, the calls did not confirm whether the caller had direct knowledge of Jody's disappearance or was attempting to exploit a long-standing missing persons case. The inability to identify the suspect limited the investigation's progress. By August of that year, the case was formally reclassified as a probable homicide. The threatening calls played a significant role in that decision, shifting the investigation's focus from a missing juvenile to the possibility that Jody had been killed. For Karen, the calls intensified an already painful situation. Over the course of 2 years, she endured repeated threats regarding her daughter's fate. Each call reinforced the uncertainty surrounding Jody's disappearance while offering no verifiable proof of her whereabouts. Despite investigative efforts, the identity of the caller remains unknown, and the phone calls remain one of the most unsettling elements of the case. In 1997, 2 prison inmates approached authorities claiming they had information about Jody Ledkin's disappearance. According to their account, the person responsible for her death had hidden her body inside a car and then driven that vehicle into the Mississippi River. The tip suggested that her remains could be located underwater, concealed within the submerged vehicle. Based on this information, law enforcement organized a search of the Mississippi River. Investigators focused on areas consistent with the inmates' claims, attempting to locate any vehicle that might match the description implied by the tip. The search required coordination and careful examination of the riverbed. Despite these efforts, no vehicle connected to Jody was found, and no physical evidence was recovered. The operation concluded without confirming the inmates' statements. That same year, the Kansas City Police Department formally reclassified Jody's case as a homicide. The decision reflected the growing belief among investigators that she had likely been the victim of foul play. Although the river search did not yield results, detectives continued to pursue leads and review available information. As part of the ongoing investigation, authorities collaborated with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to create age-progressed images of Jody. In 1998, an image depicted what she might have looked like at 28 years old. A later image, released in 2014, showed a projection of her appearance at 43. Despite tips, searches, and updated investigative tools, no confirmed evidence has resolved what happened to Jody Ledkin. The information provided over the years has not produced definitive answers, and her case remains open. As of 2024, Jody Ledkin's disappearance remains unsolved. She was 14 years old when she vanished on May 23, 1985. At the time, she was described as Caucasian, standing 5 feet 1 inch tall and weighing approximately 90 pounds. She had long, straight blonde brown hair and blue eyes. Jody wore large, square, plastic-framed glasses. Distinguishing features included a small mole beneath her chin, a large birthmark under one arm, and an appendectomy scar. Her family described her as having perfect teeth. There is no confirmed information regarding what she was wearing on the night she disappeared. Over the decades, the case has shifted in classification. What began as a missing juvenile investigation was later reclassified as a homicide. Despite that determination, no arrests have been made and no definitive evidence has explained what happened to her. Jody's father, Melvin Ledkin, has since passed away without learning the fate of his daughter. Her mother, Karen Stratton, now lives in Arkansas. However, she continues to travel to Kansas City several times each year. During these visits, she retraces Jody's last known movements, driving through former neighborhoods and revisiting locations connected to the night she disappeared. She reviews notes collected over the years and continues searching for clarity. Karen has acknowledged that some investigators have considered the possibility that Jody may have left intentionally. Even so, the case remains classified as a homicide. Decades after her disappearance, there are still no confirmed answers. Anyone with information regarding Jody Ledkin's case is urged to contact the Kansas City Police Department at 816-234-5140, the Cold Case Missing Persons and Runaway Unit at 816-234-5136, or the TIPS hotline at 816-4748-477. After Jody Ledkin, we have Kelly Bergh Dove cold case that also remained unsolved. Kelly Bergh Dove was born on August 30, 1962, to her parents Rachel and Ernest. She entered the world as part of a large and active family in Virginia, one of 6 children growing up in a full household. With 5 siblings, Kelly fit squarely in the middle, surrounded by the constant movement, noise, and shared responsibilities that came with a busy home. Family life was structured around togetherness, and from an early age, Kelly developed strong bonds with her brothers and sisters. After several years of marriage, Rachel and Ernest went their separate ways. As a single mother, Rachel focused on providing stability for her children. While working as a waitress, she met Fred Bergh. The relationship progressed quickly, and in 1971, Rachel and Fred married. Fred formally adopted Rachel's children, giving them the Bergh surname and solidifying his role in their lives. For the children, the transition brought a renewed sense of structure. Kelly's sister, Elaine, would later describe Fred simply as "my dad," reflecting how fully he stepped into the role. In 1975, the family relocated from Virginia Beach to Bridgewater, Virginia. Fred wanted a quieter environment, away from the pace of a growing city, where the children could be raised with a greater sense of calm and community. The move reshaped their daily lives, but maintained the closeness within the household. Kelly shared a bedroom with her younger sister, Elaine, strengthening their bond. Elaine remembered Kelly as adventurous and confident, someone who never backed down from a challenge. She encouraged Elaine to face fears, even persuading her to ride her first roller coaster. Within the family, Kelly's personality stood out, spirited, steady, and deeply connected to those around her. During her teenage years, Kelly met Bergh Dove through mutual friends. Dale was approximately 5 or 6 years older than she was, and despite the age difference, their relationship developed quickly. At 16 years old, Kelly became pregnant. In keeping with common expectations at the time, the couple married as they prepared to become parents. In December 1977, their daughter Tammy was born. Kelly embraced motherhood at a young age and adjusted to the responsibilities that came with raising a child. Those close to her described Tammy as the center of Kelly's world, often referring to her as the apple of her eye. Despite her age, Kelly took her role as a mother seriously and committed herself to providing stability and care for her daughter. At the same time, she remained focused on her education. Kelly graduated high school early, demonstrating determination and discipline. She made plans to attend Blue Ridge Community College, looking ahead toward a future that would allow her to better support her family. Her mother, Rachel, loaned her money to help pay for tuition. Kelly worked to save the remaining funds herself, determined to contribute and maintain independence. Kelly and Dale shared an apartment and lived together with their daughter for 5 years. While their marriage was not perfect, they continued to build a life under the same roof as they raised Tammy. During this period, Kelly balanced the demands of marriage, employment, and motherhood with her educational ambitions. Those who knew her saw a young woman motivated to improve her circumstances. She carried the responsibilities of adulthood while still in her teens, supported by a close-knit family and guided by clear goals for the future. Kelly Bergh Dove was employed at the Imperial gas station, located at 2141 South Main Street in Harrisonburg, Virginia. The station operated 24 hours a day and served customers traveling along South Main Street, approximately a mile south of James Madison University. The location was described as somewhat isolated, positioned along a stretch of road that was not heavily developed at the time. Kelly did not work there alone in a broader sense. Her sisters were also employees at the station. Debbie, the oldest sister, served as the manager. Rose and Kelly worked as clerks. It was common for the sisters to share shifts and occasionally switch schedules when needed. The arrangement reflected both convenience and trust within the family. Working overnight shifts was not unusual for Kelly. According to those who knew her, she was considered capable and responsible. She was not easily frightened and had experience handling late-night customers on her own. The job allowed her to earn money while continuing to plan for her education. On June 18, 1982, Kelly switched shifts with her sister Rose, who had originally been scheduled to work that night. The decision appeared routine at the time, a simple exchange between siblings. There was no indication that anything about the shift would be different from any other overnight assignment. The Harrisonburg Police Department was located approximately 3 miles away on North Main Street. The proximity suggested that help was not far if needed. That night, the Imperial gas station became the last confirmed location where Kelly Bergh Dove was seen. Shortly after midnight on June 18, 1982, while working alone at the Imperial gas station, Kelly Bergh Dove placed a call to the Harrisonburg Police Department. She reported that she had been receiving anonymous harassing phone calls and described a suspicious man outside the station. During the call, she explained that the man had come into the store earlier and had been dressed improperly. Reports have stated that many believe this may have meant he exposed himself, though the exact meaning was never fully clarified. Kelly told police she was working alone and asked if an officer could check on her. Within minutes, Kelly called the police again. During this second call, her tone carried greater urgency. She reported that the same man had returned to the gas station. She described him as driving a silver or gray vehicle, possibly a Ford. Kelly told authorities that the man was using the exterior payphone outside the building to call the station and make obscene comments to her. She repeated her concern and again requested assistance. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Kelly made a third call to the Harrisonburg Police Department. This time, she sounded frightened. She told the dispatcher that the man was back once more and asked for help to be sent immediately. During the call, there was a shuffling noise. The line suddenly went dead before the conversation was completed. According to official reports, officers were dispatched and arrived at the Imperial gas station within 2 minutes of the final call. The rapid response was documented in subsequent accounts of the case. By the time police reached the scene, Kelly Bergh Dove was no longer inside the station. When officers arrived at the Imperial gas station within minutes of Kelly Bergh Dove's final call, the store was empty. The lights were on and the door was unlocked. Inside, there were no immediate signs of disturbance. Kelly's purse remained on the counter. A magazine she had been reading lay open nearby. In an ashtray, a cigarette had burned down completely. The scene appeared frozen in place, as though she had stepped away briefly and never returned. There were no visible signs of robbery. Nothing in the store appeared ransacked or out of order. Cash and merchandise were undisturbed. Investigators did not observe signs of a physical struggle inside the building. In the initial moments of the response, there was confusion about whether Kelly might have left in her own vehicle. It was later confirmed that her husband had dropped her off for her shift, and she did not have a car at the station that night. That clarification narrowed the possibilities and intensified concern that she had been taken. Accounts differ regarding the handling of forensic evidence. Some reports state that no fingerprints were collected because the station operated 24 hours a day, making it difficult to isolate relevant prints from customers. Other statements suggest that fingerprint dusting was conducted at the scene. The exact scope of evidence collection has been described inconsistently in public reports. Investigators developed a theory that the abduction may have occurred quickly, possibly in less than 15 seconds. The payphone Kelly had used was located near the front entrance, and officers believed a suspect could have entered and forced her out rapidly. Her family described Kelly as small but feisty, someone unlikely to leave willingly without resistance unless confronted with a weapon. Despite the rapid response, there was little physical evidence to explain what had happened inside the gas station that night. On the same day Kelly Bergh Dove disappeared, a clerk at a nearby convenience store contacted authorities with potentially significant information. The clerk reported seeing a suspicious white male driving a silver vehicle approximately 30 minutes before Kelly's final call to police. According to the account, the vehicle had stopped at the store, and the man's behavior drew attention. The clerk described the individual as being in his early to mid-20s, approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall, with a thin build and shoulder-length blonde hair. Based on this description, investigators created a suspect sketch. The image would later become closely associated with the case and circulated publicly as authorities sought information. It was also noted during the investigation that obscene phone calls to local gas stations and convenience stores were not unusual. Female clerks working overnight shifts sometimes received inappropriate or harassing calls. However, reports indicated that such calls largely stopped after Kelly's disappearance. The timing raised questions, though no definitive connection was established. Investigators followed more than 500 tips in the months and years after Kelly vanished. Numerous individuals were interviewed and examined as possible suspects. Despite the volume of leads, no one was publicly named as a suspect in the case. One unnamed individual reportedly had a prior record involving indecent exposure and obscene phone calls. According to available information, this person was never formally ruled out. Still, no charges were filed and no arrests were made. The development of the suspect description provided direction, but it did not lead to resolution. In the days and months following Kelly Bergh Dove's disappearance, the investigation expanded beyond the Harrisonburg Police Department. State police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved, assisting in reviewing evidence and following incoming leads. Despite the combined resources and continued attention, no arrests were made. More than 500 tips were investigated, yet each lead ultimately failed to produce conclusive results. Questions also emerged regarding the timing of the police response. Reports indicate that Kelly made 3 separate calls before officers arrived. While police stated they reached the gas station within minutes of the final call, some accounts referenced a gap in time between earlier calls and dispatch. The precise sequence has been discussed in reports over the years, but no definitive explanation has resolved whether an earlier arrival could have changed the outcome. An anonymous local resident donated $1,000 to be offered as a reward for information leading to answers in the case. The reward was publicized but never claimed. As the investigation slowed, the absence of new evidence became a continuing source of frustration for both law enforcement and Kelly's family. Vigils were organized in Kelly's name as the years passed. Family members and friends gathered to remember her and to keep attention focused on the case. After her disappearance, Kelly's husband, Dale, transferred full legal custody of their daughter, Tammy, to Rachel and Fred. They raised her within the family home. In 1989, Kelly was officially declared deceased. Despite that legal designation, her family continued searching for answers. Decades later, the case remains unresolved, marked by unanswered questions and enduring grief. Glenn Barker became a name discussed in connection with Kelly Bergh Dove's disappearance due to his criminal history in Virginia. In June 1983, Barker was convicted of second-degree murder in the disappearance of 12-year-old Katie Bursky, who vanished in July 1982. Her body was never recovered, yet Barker was found guilty and sentenced to prison. Prior to that conviction, Barker had faced assault charges in North Carolina, stemming from an incident in which a woman was abducted at knife point and later escaped. After serving time, Barker was later suspected in the 1996 murders of Cynthia Powers Johnson and her 7-year-old daughter, Heather. Both were found stabbed, and their home had been set on fire. Although Barker was considered a suspect in that case, no physical evidence conclusively linked him to the crime. He denied involvement. Because Barker had a documented history of violent behavior, including abduction and sexual assault allegations, some observers questioned whether he could be connected to Kelly's disappearance in June 1982. His physical appearance at the time included blonde hair, which corresponded in part with the description provided by a convenience store clerk who saw a suspicious man driving a silver vehicle the night Kelly vanished. However, discrepancies were noted. The clerk described the man as approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall, while Barker was reported to be significantly taller. No official statement has ever confirmed a direct connection between Barker and Kelly's case. Law enforcement has not publicly named him as a suspect in her disappearance. Glenn Barker died in 2014. Until his death, he consistently denied any involvement in the disappearance of Bergh Dove. In August 1986, unidentified human remains were discovered in Chesterfield County, Virginia. The victim became known as Chesterfield Jane Doe. Authorities determined that she had been the victim of homicide and that her body had been dismembered. The head and hands were not recovered. Medical examiners estimated that the victim had been between 22 and 32 years old at the time of her death. That age range was consistent with Bergh Dove, who would have been in her early 20s when she disappeared in 1982. For many years, the lack of identifiable features limited efforts to determine Jane Doe's identity. In 2019, advancements in DNA phenotyping technology allowed investigators to produce a facial composite representing the victim's most likely appearance. The image depicted a young woman with dark hair, fair skin, and dark eyes. Observers noted a resemblance between the composite and photographs of Kelly. Reported estimates of the victim's height and weight, along with hair and eye color, were also similar to Kelly's physical description. The similarities prompted renewed attention from Kelly's family. Her sister Elaine publicly stated that she had spoken with a detective who indicated that a DNA comparison between Kelly and the Chesterfield Jane Doe would be prioritized. According to available information, that comparison had not yet been completed at the time of the most recent reports. Despite the resemblance and overlapping characteristics, no official identification has been made. Chesterfield Jane Doe remains unidentified, and Bergh Dove's disappearance remains unresolved. The potential connection exists, but without confirmed DNA results, it remains unproven. More than 4 decades after Bergh Dove disappeared, fundamental questions remain unanswered. Investigators have never publicly identified the man described driving a silver or gray vehicle near the Imperial gas station that night. His identity, movements, and connection to the harassing phone calls have never been established. Another unresolved detail involves the obscene calls reported by Kelly and other clerks working overnight shifts. While such calls had reportedly been common, accounts indicate they largely stopped after Kelly vanished. Whether this change was coincidence or directly connected to her disappearance has never been conclusively determined. There is also the possibility that the suspect was someone known within the community. One unnamed individual reportedly had a record involving indecent exposure and obscene calls and was never fully ruled out. Despite extensive investigation and hundreds of tips, no arrest has been made. Authorities have stated they believe the crime was likely one of opportunity rather than a targeted attack. Kelly's sister, Elaine, continues to advocate publicly for answers. She has expressed hope that advancements in investigative methods and renewed attention from law enforcement may finally provide clarity. Vigils have been held in Kelly's name, keeping her memory present within the community. Bergh Dove was last seen during her overnight shift at the Imperial gas station on June 18, 1982. She made 3 calls to police reporting harassment before the line went silent. Officers arrived within minutes to find the station empty. Decades later, her disappearance remains unresolved, and the search for answers continues. In the end, we have the case of Tiffany Sessions. Tiffany Louise Sessions was born on October 29, 1968, in Miami, Florida, to Patrick Sessions and Hillary Sessions. Known to her family as Tiffy, she grew up in a household that valued ambition and achievement. From an early age, she developed a reputation for responsibility and determination, qualities that would later define her academic and personal life. By 1989, Tiffany was a junior at the University of Florida in Gainesville, majoring in business with a focus on finance. She approached her education with discipline and seriousness, earning recognition as a dependable and hardworking student. Professors and classmates regarded her as organized and focused, someone who planned carefully and followed through on commitments. She had pledged sororities during her freshman year, but ultimately chose not to join, concerned that the social demands might interfere with her studies. Academic performance remained her top priority. Tiffany spoke openly about her future goals. She hoped to one day become the chief executive officer of a large company, and she structured her college experience around that ambition. She maintained careful routines, balanced her coursework, and avoided distractions that might derail her plans. Friends described her as confident and determined, not someone who acted impulsively. In early 1989, after returning from winter break, Tiffany began taking daily power walks. She wanted to improve her fitness ahead of an upcoming ski trip with her father. At the time, she was living at the Casablanca East Apartments in Gainesville, maintaining the steady routine that defined her life. On Thursday, February 9, 1989, 20-year-old Tiffany Sessions left her apartment at the Casablanca East Apartments on Southwest 35th Place in Gainesville, Florida. Sometime between 4 and 5 p.m., she told her roommate, Kathleen Sue, that she was going out alone for a power walk. She planned to return before 7 p.m. so they could study together later that evening. Tiffany dressed for her routine walk in a white pullover sweatshirt with gray horizontal striping and the word Aspen printed near the collar. She wore bright red sweatpants and tennis shoes. On her wrist was a two-tone silver and gold Rolex watch, a gift from her father. She carried a black Sony Walkman to listen to music during her walk. Before leaving, she removed most of her jewelry and left it inside the apartment. She also left behind her wallet, identification, keys, and car, expecting Kathleen to be home when she returned. Tiffany was known for punctuality and consistency. If she said she would be somewhere at a certain time, she followed through. When 7:15 p.m. arrived and she had not returned, Kathleen grew concerned. By 7:30 p.m., she drove along Tiffany's usual walking route, searching sidewalks and nearby areas for any sign of her friend. She found nothing. After returning to the apartment and still finding no trace of Tiffany, Kathleen contacted Tiffany's mother to report her missing. She then called the Alachua County Sheriff's Office. Deputies responded and drove along the route Tiffany typically walked. They found no evidence of a struggle, no signs of violence, and no confirmed crime scene. Because there were no immediate indications of foul play, authorities did not initially treat the disappearance as a crime. In the hours following Tiffany Sessions' disappearance on February 9, 1989, deputies from the Alachua County Sheriff's Office began reviewing the area along her usual walking route near the Casablanca East Apartments. Officers drove the roads and surveyed nearby sidewalks and wooded sections where she was known to exercise. They found no physical evidence of a struggle, no discarded clothing, and no indication of violence. There was no confirmed crime scene. Because Tiffany was 20 years old and legally an adult, investigators initially considered the possibility that she had chosen to leave on her own. As word of her disappearance spread, individuals living in the area reported possible sightings from that afternoon. Some witnesses stated they had seen a young woman matching Tiffany's description, speaking to people seated inside a vehicle. Others recalled a car that appeared to be near her as she walked. However, none of the witnesses could definitively confirm that the woman was Tiffany, and there was uncertainty about whether she entered any vehicle. Authorities never confirmed that the person observed was her. Tiffany's parents, Patrick and Hillary Sessions, rejected the suggestion that she had left voluntarily. They emphasized that she had left behind her wallet, identification, keys, and car, along with nearly all of her jewelry. She had made plans to return home that evening and had no known personal conflicts or reasons to disappear. Patrick Sessions, a media executive, began organizing his own search efforts. He hired a private investigator and chartered a helicopter to survey nearby land. Despite these expanded efforts, no trace of Tiffany was found. In the days following Tiffany Sessions' disappearance, the search expanded rapidly beyond the immediate area surrounding the Casablanca East apartments. The Federal Bureau of Investigation became involved, later describing the effort as the largest search case in Florida's history. Local law enforcement coordinated with federal agents as volunteers gathered in large numbers to comb through wooded areas, open fields, and neighborhoods around Gainesville. Students and faculty from the University of Florida joined community members in organized searches. Groups moved methodically through dense brush and undeveloped land near Tiffany's usual walking route. Over time, searchers covered miles of terrain, including locations that were difficult to access. Despite the scale of the effort, no physical evidence linked to Tiffany was discovered. Public awareness campaigns intensified. Missing person posters bearing Tiffany's photograph and description were distributed across Gainesville, appearing in stores, restaurants, and public buildings. The campaign soon expanded nationwide. More than 400,000 posters were printed and circulated. The Sessions family used their seafood business to include flyers in shipments sent overseas, broadening international exposure. Long-haul truck drivers and supporters carried posters across state lines, placing them in visible locations. Billboards featuring Tiffany's image were erected in several Florida cities in an effort to generate additional tips. Media interest grew steadily. Nearly 100 reporters contacted authorities or the family seeking information about the case. National exposure increased further when Tiffany's disappearance was featured on the television program America's Most Wanted. Following the broadcast, investigators received more than 400 tips from viewers. In an effort to encourage cooperation, Patrick Sessions announced a $75,000 reward for information leading to Tiffany's safe return. He later raised the amount to $250,000. Despite thousands of reported sightings, calls, and leads generated by widespread publicity and sustained search efforts, investigators were unable to confirm any information that advanced the case toward resolution. As the investigation into Tiffany Sessions' disappearance continued, detectives pursued numerous leads that ultimately failed to produce results. Early on, an ex-boyfriend drew attention from investigators. He was questioned and examined as a potential suspect, but after review, authorities cleared him of involvement. In late June 1989, Patrick Sessions received phone calls from two men who claimed they had abducted Tiffany. They demanded $200,000 in exchange for her return and threatened to take her out of the country if payment was not made. Over a 48-hour period, the men continued contacting Patrick, escalating their demands. Suspicious of the calls, he contacted the FBI. Federal agents organized a sting operation and arrested the two men at a payphone in Ocala while they were making another call. Both were charged with federal extortion offenses and quickly admitted they had no connection to Tiffany's disappearance. In 1995, convicted killer Wayne Earl D. was identified as a possible suspect. Investigators reviewed his history and examined any potential link to the case, but he was eventually ruled out. Later, Michael Christopher Knickerbocker, a convicted rapist serving 5 consecutive life sentences in a Florida prison, claimed responsibility for Tiffany's disappearance. He reportedly told fellow inmates that he had chained her to a tree and disposed of her body near Fort Myers in the Caloosahatchee River. However, authorities questioned the feasibility of his involvement because he was not living in Gainesville at the time Tiffany disappeared. He later recanted his confession, and investigators eliminated him as a suspect. Over the years, Tiffany has been excluded as a match in approximately 150 unidentified decedent cases across the United States. By the end of 1990, the FBI acknowledged that the investigation had gone cold, although the case remained officially open. In September 1994, more than 5 years after Tiffany Sessions disappeared, she was declared legally dead at the request of her mother, Hillary Sessions. The decision was made in a Tampa courtroom. Hillary later explained that the request did not reflect a belief that her daughter was dead. Instead, it was a legal step taken for practical reasons. By having Tiffany declared legally deceased, the family could access her $50,000 life insurance policy. The funds were intended to continue supporting efforts to locate her remains and pursue investigative leads. The declaration marked a significant procedural moment in the case, but it did not signal an end to the family's search. Hillary and Patrick Sessions remained actively involved, maintaining contact with the Alachua County Sheriff's Department and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. They continued to advocate for renewed attention to the investigation and to encourage public cooperation. The Sessions family sustained reward offers for information and supported awareness initiatives that kept Tiffany's name visible. Public efforts included listings through the Charlie Project and the Tiffany Sessions Facebook project page, which shared case details and updates. These platforms allowed supporters and investigators to circulate information widely and preserve public interest. Hillary Sessions also authored a book titled "Where's My Tiffany?", in which she described raising her daughter and the emotional impact of her disappearance. Through legal action, public outreach, and personal writing, the family maintained consistent advocacy in pursuit of answers. In 2006, when Sadie Darnell became sheriff of Alachua County, she identified Tiffany Sessions' disappearance as a priority. The case had remained open for years without resolution. In 2013, Detective Kevin Allen was assigned to the Cold Case Unit and began reviewing extensive files, including boxes of reports, witness statements, and prior investigative notes. Despite decades of work, there had been no confirmed suspect and no recovery of Tiffany's remains. Attention turned to Paul Eugene Rowles, a now deceased convicted serial killer. At the time Tiffany disappeared in February 1989, Rowles was employed by a construction-related company near the route where she regularly walked. Records indicated that he did not report to work on the day she vanished. Earlier in his life, Rowles had been convicted in 1972 of murdering his neighbor in Miami. He was sentenced to life in prison but was granted parole in 1985. In 1988, he moved to Gainesville, placing him in the area months before Tiffany's disappearance. Years later, Rowles was linked by DNA evidence to the 1992 murder of Elizabeth Beth Foster, a 20-year-old student whose body was found buried in a shallow grave less than a mile from where Tiffany was last seen. The proximity of the two cases prompted renewed scrutiny. When investigators attempted to question Rowles about Tiffany, he was hospitalized and heavily sedated. He died in 2013 without providing a statement. After his death, investigators recovered an address book among his belongings. Inside, they found a notation reading "Number 2, September 2nd, 89, Number 2. Authorities believed the date corresponded to Tiffany's disappearance and interpreted the entry as identifying her as his second victim. Although the notation did not constitute definitive proof, investigators publicly stated their belief that Paul Eugene Rowles was responsible for Tiffany Sessions' disappearance and presumed murder. In 2014, investigators conducted a large excavation in the wooded area near where Elizabeth Beth Foster's body had been discovered in 1992. The search focused on land less than a mile from the route Tiffany Sessions walked on February 9, 1989. Authorities hoped renewed physical examination of the terrain might locate her remains. Despite extensive digging and coordinated efforts, nothing connected to Tiffany was recovered. Law enforcement officials have stated their belief that Paul Eugene Rowles was responsible for her disappearance and presumed murder. The notation found in his address book, combined with his presence in Gainesville at the time and his employment near Tiffany's walking route, led investigators to that conclusion. However, no conclusive physical evidence has been found directly tying Rowles to Tiffany. Her body has never been located. The case remains open. Tiffany Sessions has been missing since February 9, 1989. The search for her became one of the largest and most publicized in Florida history, involving local authorities, federal agencies, and thousands of volunteers. Over the decades, her family has continued to seek answers, maintaining contact with investigators and supporting public awareness efforts. Tiffany was 20 years old when she disappeared. She was last seen leaving the Casablanca East Apartments in Gainesville for a routine afternoon power walk. She carried a Sony Walkman and wore a silver and gold Rolex watch. She never returned.